Hello, I'm Santiago, 42 years old. I've worked hard my whole life to build a successful business from scratch. My company, Constructora Santiago, has become a recognized name in our industry, and I'm proud of what I've achieved. I remember the day I opened the doors to my office for the first time. It was a small office in the heart of the city, and I was the only employee. My dream was to build an empire, and I worked tirelessly to make it a reality. Over time, I hired a team of talented people who shared my vision, and together we achieved great things. One of those employees was Matteo, a young, ambitious man who had been with me for several years. I had taken him under my wing, mentored him, and given him more responsibilities as he proved his worth. I considered him a valuable member of our team and a friend. But the trust I placed in Matteo would be my biggest mistake. As time went on, I began to notice irregularities in the accounting and project management. At first, I thought they were just simple mistakes, but soon I realized that something more serious was going on. The relationship I had with Matteo was very close, and it was hard for me to believe that he could be behind all of this. However, the reality was harsher than I imagined. Matteo was stealing money from my company, and I had no idea how to stop him. The question is, how did I not see it coming? How did I not notice the warning signs? And most importantly, how did I discover it and bring him to justice? That's the story I'm going to share with you today. A story of betrayal, deception, and finally, redemption. I sat at my desk, staring at the financial reports in front of me. Something didn't add up. The numbers were off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I called in my accountant, Sophia, to review the documents with me. "Sophia, look at this," I said, pointing to a discrepancy in the accounts. "Can you explain this to me?" Sophia's eyes scanned the page, and she frowned. "I don't know, Santiago. This doesn't look right. Let me check some other records." She left my office and returned with a stack of files. We spent the next few hours poring over the documents, and the more we dug, the more suspicious things became. "Sophia, I think we have a problem," I said finally. "It looks like someone has been embezzling funds from the company." Sophia's expression was grim. "I think you're right, Santiago, and I think I know who might be behind it." "Who?" I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. "Matteo," Sophia said quietly. "I've been noticing some strange transactions in his department, and now that I see these reports, I think he might be using company funds for personal gain." I felt a pang of betrayal. Matteo was one of my most trusted employees, someone I had mentored and given more responsibilities over time. I couldn't believe he would do something like this. "I need proof," I said firmly. "Let's gather all the evidence we can and confront him with it." Sophia nodded, and together we started to compile a case against Matteo. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to get to the bottom of this. As we worked, I couldn't help but think about how Matteo had been acting lately. He had been distant, always on his phone, and seemed evasive whenever I asked him about his projects. I had brushed it off as stress, but now I realized it might have been something more. The hours ticked by, and finally, we had enough evidence to confront Matteo. I called him into my office, my heart racing with anticipation. "Matteo, I need to talk to you about something," I said, my voice firm but controlled. Matteo walked in, a look of confidence on his face. But as he saw the documents on my desk, his expression faltered. "Santiago, what's going on?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "I think you know exactly what's going on, Matteo," I said, my eyes locked on his. "We've been going over the financial reports, and it appears you've been embezzling funds from the company." Matteo's face turned white, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he tried to spin a story, but it was too late. The evidence was against him, and he knew it. I can explain," he stammered, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. "Matteo, you're fired, effective immediately. We'll be taking further action, including reporting this to the authorities." Matteo's face crumpled, and he looked like he was about to break down, but I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I was determined to hold him accountable for his actions. As Matteo left my office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. I had trusted him, and he had betrayed that trust, but I was also determined to move forward, to rebuild my company, and make sure something like this never happened again. The discovery of the theft was just the beginning. Now it was time to take action and bring Matteo to justice. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of our company's lawyer, ready to take the next step in a long and difficult process. I knew I had to gather concrete evidence before confronting Matteo. I couldn't just accuse him without proof. I called in our head of security, Carlos, and asked him to help me investigate. "Carlos, I need you to review all the financial transactions for the past year," I said. "I want to know if there's any pattern or irregularity that might indicate Matteo's involvement." Carlos nodded and got to work. He spent hours poring over financial records, transaction logs, and account statements. Meanwhile, I worked with Sofia to track down any discrepancies in the company's accounts. As the day went on, the evidence started to pile up. We found several large transactions that Matteo had authorized, but there was no record of the goods or services being delivered. We also discovered that Matteo had been using company funds to pay for personal expenses, including luxury items and vacations. I asked Carlos to dig deeper into Matteo's background to see if there were any red flags that might have indicated his dishonesty. Carlos discovered that Matteo had a history of financial troubles and had even filed for bankruptcy a few years ago. The more we dug, the more evidence we found. It was clear that Matteo had been embezzling funds from the company for a long time. I instructed Carlos to gather all the evidence and prepare a report. "Santiago, I think we have enough to take to the authorities," Carlos said, "but we need to be careful. If Matteo finds out we're investigating him, he might try to cover his tracks or even retaliate." I nodded. "Let's keep this quiet for now. I want to make sure we have a solid case before we move forward." Over the next few days, we continued to gather evidence, documenting every transaction and irregularity. We interviewed other employees who had worked with Matteo, and they corroborated our suspicions. One employee, a young woman named Lucia, came forward and told us that she had suspected Matteo of wrongdoing several months ago. "I saw him altering financial reports and making unauthorized transactions," she said, "but I didn't know what to do, so I kept quiet." Her testimony was valuable, and it helped to build our case against Matteo. As we gathered more evidence, I realized that Matteo's betrayal went far beyond just embezzlement. He had compromised the trust of our entire team and put the company's reputation at risk. I knew I had to take action, but I also wanted to make sure that we followed the proper procedures. I didn't want Matteo to get off on a technicality or exploit any loopholes. I instructed Carlos to work with our lawyers to prepare a case against Matteo. As the evidence mounted, I couldn't help but wonder how Matteo had managed to deceive me for so long. I had trusted him, given him responsibilities, and even considered him a friend. His betrayal cut deep, and I knew it would take time to heal. But for now, my focus was on gathering evidence and building a case against Matteo. I was determined to hold him accountable for his actions and protect my company from further harm. The investigation was ongoing, and I knew it would take time to get to the bottom of things, but I was ready to see justice served. I called Matteo into my office, my mind racing with anticipation. I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy, but I had to confront him about his actions. "Matteo, please sit down," I said, my voice firm but controlled. Matteo walked in, a look of curiosity on his face. "What's this about, Santiago?" he asked, taking a seat. "I think you know exactly what this is about, Matteo," I said, my eyes locked on his. "We've been investigating some discrepancies in the company's accounts, and we've found some evidence that points to you." Matteo's expression changed, and for a moment, he looked caught off guard. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to sound confident. I leaned forward, my voice taking on a more serious tone. "Matteo, we have proof. We've been over the financial records, and it's clear that you've been embezzling funds from the company. We've also spoken to other employees who have corroborated our suspicions." Matteo's face fell, and he looked like he was about to break down. I can explain," he stammered. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening," I said, my voice skeptical. Matteo started to spin a story trying to justify his actions, but I wasn't having it. "Matteo, stop," I said, cutting him off. "We know what you've been doing. We've seen the evidence. You're not just a thief, you're a liar." Mateo's eyes dropped and he looked at the floor. "I'm sorry, Santiago," he muttered. "I don't know what came over me." I shook my head. "Sorry isn't enough, Mateo. You've betrayed my trust, and you've hurt the company. You're fired, effective immediately." Mateo looked up, a mixture of anger and desperation on his face. "You can't do this, Santiago," he said. "I'll sue you for wrongful termination." I smiled coldly. "I'm not worried about that, Mateo. We've done our due diligence and we have enough evidence to take to the authorities. You're going to face consequences for your actions." Mateo's face turned red with anger, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But then he seemed to deflate, and he stood up, his head hung low. "I'm sorry, Santiago," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "You should be. You've caused a lot of damage, Mateo. But it's not just about you. It's about the company, and it's about the people who trusted you. You've let us all down." Mateo walked out of my office, his head hung low in shame. I watched him go, feeling a mix of emotions. I was angry and disappointed, but I was also relieved that I had finally uncovered the truth. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of our company's lawyer. "I need you to come to my office," I said. "We have a situation that requires your attention." The lawyer arrived a few minutes later and we discussed the case against Mateo. We decided to press charges and take him to court. As I sat at my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. Mateo had been a talented employee and I had trusted him. But in the end, his greed had consumed him and he had lost sight of what was important. I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult process, but I was determined to see it through, to protect my company and my employees from further harm. I was ready to take action, and I was ready to face whatever consequences came our way. I decided to take a more aggressive approach to dealing with Mateo's betrayal. I instructed our lawyer to file a police report and to press charges against him. I also decided to inform our board of directors about the situation so they could be aware of the potential risks and consequences. The board meeting was tense and dramatic. I presented the evidence we had gathered, and the directors were shocked and outraged by Mateo's actions. They demanded that we take immediate action to protect the company's interests and reputation. "We need to make an example out of him," one of the directors said. "We can't let this kind of behavior go unchecked." I nodded in agreement. "I agree. We'll do everything we can to hold him accountable and to prevent something like this from happening again in the future." The board also decided to launch an internal investigation to determine how Mateo was able to carry out his scheme without being detected sooner. They wanted to know if there were any weaknesses in our systems or procedures that needed to be addressed. As the news of Mateo's betrayal spread throughout the company, many employees were shocked and upset. Some had worked closely with Mateo and felt betrayed by his actions. Others were concerned about the potential impact on the company's reputation and financial stability. I held a town hall meeting to address the employees' concerns and to reassure them that we were taking action to protect the company's interests. "We will do everything we can to hold Mateo accountable for his actions," I said. "We will also take steps to prevent something like this from happening again in the future." The employees seemed to appreciate my honesty and transparency. They asked questions and expressed their concerns, and I did my best to address them. As the situation continued to escalate, I realized that Mateo's betrayal had exposed deeper issues within the company. We had been too trusting, too willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. We needed to tighten up our procedures and to be more vigilant in the future. I instructed our management team to review our internal controls and to identify areas where we could improve. We needed to make sure that we had the right checks and balances in place to prevent something like this from happening again. The situation with Mateo was a wake-up call for all of us. It reminded us that we couldn't take our employees' loyalty for granted. We needed to earn their trust every day, and we needed to be vigilant in protecting our company's interests. As I reflected on the situation, I realized that Mateo's betrayal had taught me a valuable lesson. I had been too trusting, too willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I had let my personal relationships cloud my judgment, and it had cost the company dearly. I vowed to be more cautious in the future, to trust, but verify. I would make sure that our internal controls were strong and effective, and that we had the right people in place to prevent something like this from happening again. The situation with Matteo was far from over. We still had a long way to go before we could put this behind us and move on, but I was determined to see it through, to protect my company and my employees from further harm. I knew I had to take decisive action to protect my company and its employees. I instructed our lawyer to proceed with filing a lawsuit against Matteo and to seek damages for the harm he had caused. I also decided to terminate Matteo's employment with the company, effective immediately. The news of Matteo's termination spread quickly throughout the company, and many employees were relieved that action was being taken. Some even expressed their gratitude for my leadership and for taking a strong stance against Matteo's behavior. I met with our senior management team to discuss the next steps. We needed to review our internal controls and procedures to ensure that something like this couldn't happen again. We also needed to communicate with our clients and stakeholders about the situation and to reassure them that we were taking action to protect their interests. We need to be transparent about what happened, I said. We need to let our clients know that we're taking action to hold Matteo accountable and that we're committed to preventing something like this from happening again in the future. The management team agreed, and we began crafting a communication plan to inform our clients and stakeholders about the situation. We would be honest about what had happened, and we would outline the steps we were taking to prevent similar incidents in the future. As we worked on the communication plan, I couldn't help but think about the potential consequences of Matteo's actions. Had he damaged our reputation irreparably? Would our clients and stakeholders trust us again? I knew that rebuilding trust would take time, but I was determined to do everything in my power to make it happen. I was committed to transparency, accountability, and fairness. I would make sure that our company would emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever. The days that followed were busy, as we worked to contain the fallout from Matteo's actions. We communicated with our clients and stakeholders, and we began the process of reviewing and strengthening our internal controls. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary. Matteo's betrayal had been a wake-up call, and it had forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our company. But I was determined to use this experience to make our company better, stronger, and more resilient. As I looked back on the situation, I realized that Matteo's actions had taught me a valuable lesson. I had been too trusting, too willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But now, I was determined to be more vigilant, to protect my company and its employees from harm. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready for the challenge. I would do everything in my power to protect my company and to ensure that it emerged from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever. I would take action, and I would lead by example. The aftermath of Matteo's betrayal was a complex and challenging time for our company. We had to deal with the financial and reputational consequences of his actions, while also trying to move forward and rebuild. One of the first things we did was to conduct a thorough review of our internal controls and procedures. We wanted to identify any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that Matteo had exploited, and to make sure that we had the right checks and balances in place to prevent something like this from happening again. We also worked closely with our clients and stakeholders to reassure them that we were taking action to address the situation. We were transparent about what had happened, and we outlined the steps we were taking to prevent similar incidents in the future. Some of our clients were understandably upset and concerned about the situation. They had trusted us with their business, and they felt betrayed by Matteo's actions. But we worked hard to regain their trust and to demonstrate our commitment to integrity and accountability. As the days turned into weeks, we began to see the impact of Matteo's actions on our business. Some of our clients decided to take their business elsewhere, while others chose to stay with us. We understood their decisions and we respected their trust. Internally, we were working to rebuild and move forward. We implemented new controls and procedures, and we provided additional training to our employees on ethics and compliance. We also recognized and rewarded employees who had demonstrated integrity and accountability in their work. I was proud of the way our team had come together to address the situation. We had faced a difficult challenge, and we had responded with determination and integrity. I knew that we would emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever, but the aftermath of Matteo's betrayal was not without its challenges. There were still many questions to be answered, and many loose ends to tie up. We would have to wait and see how the legal proceedings against Matteo would play out, and what the consequences would be for his actions. As I reflected on the situation, I realized that Matteo's betrayal had taught me a valuable lesson. I had been too trusting, too willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But now, I was determined to be more vigilant, to protect my company and its employees from harm. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready for the challenge. I would do everything in my power to protect my company and to ensure that it emerged from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever. I met with our senior management team to discuss the progress we had made. We reviewed the steps we had taken to address the situation, and we discussed the challenges that still lay ahead. "I'm proud of the way we've handled this situation," I said. "We've taken action to address the problem, and we've demonstrated our commitment to integrity and accountability." The management team nodded in agreement. "We've learned a valuable lesson from this experience," one of them said. "We'll be more vigilant in the future, and we'll make sure that our internal controls are strong and effective." I smiled, feeling a sense of determination and resolve. "Let's move forward," I said. "Let's rebuild and strengthen our company. Let's show our clients and stakeholders that we're committed to integrity and accountability." The management team nodded, and we began to discuss the next steps. We would continue to work together to rebuild and strengthen our company. We would face challenges and obstacles along the way, but we were ready. We were determined to emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever. As I reflect on the experience with Matteo, I realize that it taught me a valuable lesson about trust and accountability. I had trusted him, and he betrayed that trust. But I also learned that sometimes people make mistakes, and it's how we respond to those mistakes that matters. I've thought a lot about what I could have done differently, and I've come to realize that there's always room for improvement. But I've also learned that integrity and accountability are essential in any organization. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, I would say this: don't give up. Take action and hold people accountable for their actions. But also, be willing to learn and grow from the experience. Matteo's betrayal was a difficult experience, but it also taught me a lot about resilience and determination. I learned that even in the face of adversity, we can choose how we respond. We can let it break us, or we can use it as an opportunity to grow and learn. As I look back on the experience, I'm proud of the way our company responded. We took action, and we held Matteo accountable for his actions. We also learned from the experience, and we're stronger and more resilient because of it. I hope that my story can serve as a reminder of the importance of integrity and accountability. It's not always easy to do the right thing, but it's always worth it. By holding people accountable for their actions, we can build trust and credibility, and we can create a culture of integrity and accountability. That's the message I want to leave you with today. Let's prioritize integrity and accountability in our organizations. Let's hold people accountable for their actions, and let's create a culture of trust and credibility. By doing so, we can build stronger, more resilient organizations that are better equipped to face the challenges of the future. Thanks for watching. If you're a business owner or leader, ask yourself, are you doing enough to protect your company from internal threats? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about business, leadership, and integrity. Let's build a community that prioritizes accountability and transparency.